The gate swung open and Uncle Bato walked in like he owned the village. Not just the compound, the whole village. The way he stepped out of that black jeep, agbada pressed sharp, gold watch catching the afternoon sun, you would think the road had been waiting for him. Children scattered, women streeting their wrappers. Adaure's father moved forward with both hands outstretched, voice already breaking before the hug even landed. Brother, you came. Uncle Bato patted his back twice, the way rich men pat poor men, and smiled. Of course I came. Did I not say I would come? Adaure stood by the doorway watching. She was 13, small for her age, her pale skin and soft pink eyes making her look like something the sun had forgotten to finish. She had heard about Uncle Bato her whole life, the one who made it, the one who left and never looked back and built something in Lagos that nobody in this village could fully explain, but everybody was proud of anyway. He looked at her then, a long, slow look, the kind that measured. "This is Adaure," he said. "Yes." Her father pulled her forward gently. "She is my brightest one. Reads everything she can find. Sharp like a blade, this girl." Uncle Bato crouched down to her level. He smelled of something expensive. His eyes were kind, or at least they wore kindness well. "Do you want to go to school, Adaure? A real school in Lagos?" Her heart cracked open. "Yes, sir." "Then pack your things." He stood and clapped her father on the shoulder. "I will take care of her like my own." That night, her father held her face in both his hands and prayed over her so long that her knees ached on the mat. His voice kept catching. She did not understand all the words, but she felt every single one of them land in her chest like seeds. When he finally said amen and looked at her, his eyes were wet. "Be good," he said. "Learn everything. Make me proud." "I will, Papa." She believed it. She believed all of it. The Lagos house was large and clean and smelled like air freshener and something Adaure could not name. Auntie Perpetua opened the door and looked at Adaure the way someone looks at a piece of furniture they did not order but have to find room for anyway. "So, you are the one," she said, not warmly. Before Adaure could answer, a pot clattered somewhere in the kitchen and Auntie Perpetua turned away. "Come inside. Drop your bag there. There's rice on the fire. Don't let it burn." Adaure stood in the middle of the sitting room with her small bag at her feet and the sounds of a city she did not know pouring in through the window. She waited for someone to show her where she would sleep. She waited for someone to mention school. Instead, Auntie Perpetua reappeared with a wrapper tied at her chest and pointed toward the kitchen. "Are you deaf? I said don't let the rice burn." That was the first night. By the third morning, Adaure understood. There would be no school, not yet, Auntie Perpetua said when she finally dared to ask. Later, Uncle Bato said when she asked him. "We are settling you in first," they both said, in the same flat voice that meant the conversation was over. She mopped floors, she washed plates, she peeled yam and pepper and egusi until her fingers ached. She ironed school uniforms, Chidimma's and Kelechi, every single morning while they sat at the table eating fried eggs and bread and arguing over who would sit by the window in the school bus. If you are watching this story and you have never been the one ironing someone else's child's uniform while your own education dies quietly in a corner, count yourself blessed. And if this story is already pulling at something in you, hit that subscribe button because we are just getting started and this is not the kind of story you want to miss halfway. Adaure watched Chidimma and Kelechi leave school every morning from the kitchen window. She watched until the gate closed behind them. Then she turned back to the pot, the mop, the pile of clothes, the long wordless day that waited for her like a sentence. She was 13, then 14, then 15. Not once did anyone buy her a school bag. The one thing they could not take was the way her mind worked. On evenings when the house was quiet and Auntie Perpetua was on the phone and the children were doing their homework at the dining table, Adaure would lean close while pretending to dust the shelves. She listened, she memorized. She borrowed Chidimma's old textbooks from the bin bag they left out for the dustman and hid them under her mattress and read them by the light that crept under her door from the corridor. She was hungry in a way food could not fix. One night, Uncle Bato came home later than usual, loosened his tie and found Adaure still awake in the kitchen, finishing the last of the dishes. He looked at her for a moment, something moving briefly across his face, something that almost looked like guilt. And then he went to the fridge and got a drink and walked to the living room without a word. Almost he said something. She dried her hands on the kitchen cloth and told herself it did not matter. But it did. Then the night everything shifted. Bato came home with a bottle of wine and warmth in his eyes that was not there before. Auntie Perpetua was dressed up, the children were in bed, and dinner was already on the table. Adaure moved quietly around the edges of the room, refilling water glasses and carrying out empty plates. At one point, she turned from the kitchen doorway and found Uncle Bato watching her with that measuring look again, older now, like a man doing arithmetic he was not proud of. He looked away first. Later, Auntie Perpetua cornered her in the hallway, voice low and sharp. "Don't get ideas in your head. You are here because we are generous. Remember that." Adaure looked at her, said nothing. Auntie Perpetua blinked. Something in the girl's silence unnerved her and walked away. Adaure stood in that hallway alone, 15 years old, 3 years stolen, and made herself a quiet private promise. I will not be here forever. She found the evening classes by accident. It was a Tuesday, market day, and Auntie Perpetua had sent her to buy tomatoes from the woman pre-street down. Adaure was walking back with the bag pressed against her chest when she heard it, chalk on a board, a teacher's voice rising and falling with the particular reading of someone explaining something important, and underneath it, the quiet scratch of pens on paper. She stopped. The building was small. A converted shop with the shutter rolled halfway up and plastic chairs arranged in uneven rows. A hand-painted sign above the door read, "Evening Literacy and Secondary Classes, all welcome." A woman in a yellow blouse was writing fractions on the board. Maybe 12 adults sat watching her, ages ranging from young to old, all of them leaning forward with the same hungry expression Adaure saw every morning in her own mirror. She stood at the entrance for a long moment. The teacher looked up and smiled. "Are you coming in?" Adaure looked down at the bag of tomatoes in her hands. Auntie Perpetua would be watching the clock. The yam needed to be on by 6. If she was late, there would be a scene, a cold dinner, a night of pointed silence that was somehow worse than shouting. "Not today," Adaure said. But she came back the next Tuesday, and the one after that. She arranged her chores so precisely, moved through the house so efficiently in those late afternoon hours, that by 5:30 she had bought herself 40 minutes. She told no one. She sat in the back row and said nothing for the first 2 weeks. Just listened, just let the classroom air settle into her lungs like something she had been starved of. By the 3rd week, the teacher asked her name. "Adaure, Adaure, can you come to the board and solve this?" She solved it. The class went quiet. The teacher stared at her work for a moment and then turned and looked at Adaure with the particular expression of someone recalibrating everything they assumed. "How long have you been out of school?" 3 years. The teacher said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "Sit in the front from now on." Those 40 minutes 3 times a week became the only hours in which Adaure fully existed. Everything else, the mopping, the cooking, the invisible labor of being useful to people who did not see her, all of it became something she endured on the way to that plastic chair, that chalkboard, that teacher who called her by her name without adding an instruction to it. She was 17 now. Chidinma had just passed her WAEC with flying colors. Uncle Bato threw a party. There was a canopy in the compound, small chops, a DJ who played until midnight. Auntie Perpetua wore a lace outfit that cost more than Adaure had spent on anything in her entire life. Relatives came from 4 states. Nobody thought to say, "And Adaure, what about you?" She served drinks all night in a plain blouse and wrapper, moving between guests with a tray, invisible and necessary in the way furniture is necessary. At some point, a tipsy uncle grabbed her wrist and said, "Ah, the Albino girl, you are still here? When will you marry?" and laughed like it was funny. Adaure smiled, removed her wrist, walked back to the kitchen. Inside, alone, she gripped the counter with both hands and breathed. She finally asked Uncle Bato directly on a Thursday evening when Auntie Perpetua was visiting a neighbor and the children were upstairs. He was in the sitting room watching the news, shoes off, a man fully relaxed in his own comfort. Uncle, she stood at the doorway, spine straight. I want to register properly for the evening classes. The teacher says I can sit the external exams if someone pays the registration. He looked at her over the television. How much? She told him. It was not much. It was the price of one bottle of the wine he bought last weekend. Something shifted in his face. Not cruelty exactly. Something worse. Indifference dressed up as practicality. Adaure, we are spending a lot on Kelechi's university preparation right now. The fees abroad are not cheap, you understand? I understand, she said carefully, but this is not much. I said not now. His voice did not rise. It simply closed, like a door with a good lock. Go and check if the generator has fuel. She stood there one breath longer than she should have, long enough for him to feel it. Then she turned and walked out. Later that night, she heard him and Auntie Perpetua talking behind their bedroom door, voices low. She did not press her ear to the wood. She did not need to. She had lived in this house long enough to know what a conversation about her sounded like. The particular quiet that followed her name, the way Auntie Perpetua's voice always got that clipped, efficient tone when the subject was Adaure's future, or rather, the importance of making sure she did not have one. She lay on her back in the dark and stared at the ceiling. She thought about her father, about his hands on her head, that last night in the village, the weight of his palms, the specific texture of his hope. She wondered if he knew. She wondered if knowing would break him, or if he already suspected and had made his peace with it in the quiet way poor men make peace with things they cannot fix. She did not cry. She had cried in this room before, and it had changed nothing. The ceiling looked the same after tears as it did before them. What she did instead was reach under her mattress and pull out the notebook she kept there, the one she filled with everything she learned in those 40-minute sessions. And she opened it to a clean page, and she wrote 3 words at the top. I am leaving. Not a plan yet, not even a decision fully formed, just a truth she was finally ready to let exist on paper, outside of her body, real enough to touch. She closed the notebook, slid it back under the mattress, and for the first time in months, she slept deeply. It was Boma who changed everything. She had not thought about him in years, a quiet boy from the evening classes who always sat 2 seats ahead of her, always finished his work first, always waited after class to ask the teacher extra questions. He had left abruptly one term without saying goodbye, and she had assumed, the way you assume things about people whose lives you only partially know, that he had simply moved on. Then, one evening, she was cleaning Chidima's old phone, left on the kitchen counter with a cracked screen and a dying battery. A notification lit up. A name she almost did not recognize, Boma, a message sent to the old number Chidima no longer used, somehow finding its way here, like something that was always meant to arrive. I heard you are still in Lagos. Are you okay? Adaure sat down slowly on the kitchen stool, read the message twice, then a third time. Such a small sentence, such an ordinary question. She could not explain why her eyes filled, not with sadness exactly, but with something adjacent to it, the particular ache of being seen after years of being invisible. She typed back with one finger, carefully, like the words were fragile. I am not okay, but I am still here. His reply came in 4 minutes. Tell me everything. If this story is doing something to your chest right now, you are not alone. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it. They talked for 3 weeks through that cracked phone screen. Not every day. Adaure could not risk it. She wrote to him in stolen minutes, early mornings before the house awoke, late nights after the last dish was dried and everyone had gone to bed. She told him things she had never said aloud, about the morning she ironed Chidima's uniform and cried so quietly into the steam that no one heard, about the party where she served drinks all night and a man grabbed her wrist and laughed, about the notebook under her mattress, about the 3 words written on the clean page. Boma read everything. He never skipped past the hard parts to get to the comfortable ones. He sat in every sentence with her. Then one night he sent a voice note instead of a message. His voice was older than she remembered, steadier, warm in a way that made the small kitchen feel less cold. Adaure, I have been thinking about what you told me. I want you to hear me clearly. You are not what they made you. You never were. And I think it is time for you to come out of that house. She pressed the phone against her chest after it finished playing. Then she played it again. Boma was in the United Kingdom. He had left Nigeria 4 years ago on a student visa that became a work permit, that became a life he quietly and stubbornly built from nothing. He worked, he saved. He was not rich, but he was free in the way that mattered, free to wake up in the morning and decide what the day would ask of him. He told her he would help with the travel documents. He knew a woman who handled these things. It would take time, it would take patience, but it was possible. I am not asking you to come for me, he said carefully, in the way of a man who understood the weight of what he was offering. What if it doesn't work? She typed back. Then we try again. But Adaure, what if it does? She sat with that question for 2 days, turned it over like a stone, examined what lived underneath it. What if it does? She had spent so many years guarding herself against hope that the feeling of it now was almost uncomfortable, like a limb that had been still too long suddenly being asked to move. On the 3rd day, she wrote back, "Tell me what I need to do." The next 4 months were the longest of her life and the most purposeful. She moved through Uncle Bato's house the same way she always had, quiet, efficient, invisible. But now there was a direction underneath the stillness. She saved every naira she could find. Errands that should have cost one amount, she stretched to cost slightly less. The difference folded into the small envelope she kept taped inside her pillowcase. She filled out forms Boma sent her, memorized details, prepared answers to questions she might be asked. Auntie Perpetua noticed nothing. Uncle Bato noticed nothing. They saw what they had always seen, a pale, quiet girl moving through their house like a shadow, useful and forgettable. She had never been more grateful for their blindness. One afternoon, Chidima came into the kitchen while Adaure was cooking and leaned against the counter in that lazy way of someone with nowhere to be. "Adaure, you've been looking different lately, oh." Adaure kept her eyes on the pot. "Different how?" "I don't know, like you're thinking about something." "I'm always thinking." Chidima shrugged and left. Adaure exhaled slowly and stirred the soup. The morning she left, Lagos was still dark. 4:30. The generators had not yet started their morning coughing. The house breathed around her in the particular deep silence of people who feel completely safe. Adaure had been awake since 2. She lay still until 4, then rose without turning on the light, dressed by memory, picked up the small bag she had packed and unpacked and repacked 3 times over the past week. She stood in the middle of her room for one moment, looked at the mattress, the window, the small crack in the wall above the door that had been there since she arrived and would be there long after she was gone. She thought about going to her father's photo. She kept it tucked into the side pocket of her bag always, and she pressed her hand against the fabric where it sat. "I'm going, Papa. I'm finally going." Then she walked out, through the corridor, past Auntie Perpetua's door, past Uncle Bato's door, past Chidima's room where a sliver of pink nightlight still glowed under the door, through the sitting room where she had served 1,000 meals and swept 1,000 mornings and been invisible for years. She did not look at any of it with anger. She did not need to. She opened the front door, stepped outside, pulled it shut behind her, softly, carefully, the way you close a chapter. The cab was waiting at the end of the road. She walked toward it without looking back, not because she was not feeling anything. She was feeling everything, her whole body tight with it, but because she had already decided that whatever she felt in that moment would not stop her feet. She got in. The cab moved. Lagos slid past the windows, grey and waking, indifferent to the fact that a girl was escaping through it. She exhaled. For the first time in 9 years, no one was about to knock on her door and give her a list. London was cold in a way she had not prepared for. Not just the weather, though the weather was genuinely shocking. A grey, wet cold that climbed inside your clothes and stayed there. But the whole texture of the city was cold in comparison to everything she knew. The faces on the underground, the way people moved without making eye contact, the particular silence of a city where everyone was alone together. Boma met her at the arrival's gate with a winter coat folded over his arm and a look on his face like a man who had been holding his breath for 4 months and was only now releasing it. "You came," he said. "I told you I would." He put the coat around her shoulders. His hands were warm. She looked up at him, this man she knew from a plastic chair in a dim Lagos classroom, who sat 2 seats ahead of her and always finished his work first, and something in her chest unlocked so quietly it almost made no sound. He took her bag without asking. They walked out of the airport together into the cold, grey London morning, and Adaure tipped her face up toward a sky she had never seen before and breathed, free, tired, terrified, alive. 3 months later, Boma kissed her for the first time on a Tuesday evening in the small kitchen of the flat she shared with a colleague while she was trying to teach herself to cook with ingredients that had unfamiliar names. He had been watching her struggle with something for 20 minutes before he crossed the kitchen, turned her gently by the shoulder, and kissed her like a man who had been wanting to do it for a long time and had finally decided that waiting is its own kind of waste. She got still for 1 second, then she kissed him back. When they pulled apart, she looked at him with her hands still on his chest and said, "You waited long enough. I didn't want to rush you." "Boma," I almost laughed. "I escaped a 9-year sentence. I think I can handle a kiss." He laughed then properly, fully, and she felt the sound of it move through her like warm water, loosening things that had been tight in her for so long she had forgotten they were supposed to be soft. Nigeria called eventually, the way it always does. Uncle Bato died on a Wednesday. A cousin sent a message, brief, factual, with no warmth. "Your uncle has passed. The burial is Saturday." Adaure read it at the kitchen table with Boma beside her. She read it twice. She felt something, but she could not immediately name it. Not grief exactly, something older and more complicated. The particular ache of mourning not a person, but everything that person represented. Years, doors, a childhood eating slowly in a house that should have protected her. She went back. Boma held her hand at the gate of the compound. Auntie Perpetua came out first, looked at Adaure, at her good coat, her steady posture, the man beside her, and something moved across her face that was not quite welcome. Kelechi appeared behind her, arms folded. "You left this family. You don't get to come and mourn with us." Adaure stood at that gate and felt the old reflex rise, the urge to shrink, to apologize, to make herself small enough to be allowed in. She felt it, she recognized it, she let it pass through her like weather. Then she looked at Auntie Perpetua calmly and said, "I came to say goodbye. I have said it." She turned. Boma's hand found her. They walked back to the car. She did not look back, not this time, not ever again. Back in London that evening, she sat with her children, 2 of them now, small and warm and loud in the way of children who have never been told to be quiet for someone else's comfort, and helped them with their reading. Her daughter sounded out a difficult word slowly, brow furrowed, tongue pressed to her lip for concentration. "Take your time softly," Adaure said. "No one is rushing you." Her daughter looked up at her and smiled, gap-teethed and completely unguarded, and she felt it move through her chest like light through a clean window. She closed the book gently, pressed a kiss to her daughter's forehead, then her son's. Boma appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of tea, looked at the 3 of them and said nothing. Just smiled the way a man smiles when he is standing inside the life he chose, and it is exactly enough. Adaure looked at him, looked at her children, looked at the ordinary, extraordinary miracle of a home that belonged to her. They can steal your years, she thought. They cannot steal what you build after. That is the story of Adaure. If it moved you, if any part of it felt familiar, felt like someone you know or something you have lived, leave a comment below. Tell us where you are watching from. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that it is never too late to choose yourself. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and we will see you in the next story, because there are so many more stories like this one, and every single one of them deserves to be told.